şaşırtıp açıp koymak lazım şeye. It's American project. It's a new American project.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Welcome. I am Miriam Lanskoy, Senior Director for Russia and Eurasia here at the National Endowment for Democracy. On behalf of the NEDS International Forum for Democratic Studies in the Eurasia section, I'm pleased to welcome all of you to today's panel discussion, Azerbaijan, a test case for democratic solidarity. Which will feature Emin Milli of Maidan TV, Kenan Aliyev of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and with comments from Thomas de Waal of Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Azerbaijan human rights last year puts civil society has been half years in jail. High-level officials of the government of Azerbaijan, including the head of the presidential administration, Ramiz Mehdiyev, and the foreign minister, Eldar Mammadov, are continuing to engage in anti-American rhetoric. They seek to portray NGOs as a tool of U.S. foreign policy that they claim is geared at regime change. Any criticism of the government is anti-Azerbaijan. One can questions about the government's human rights record without being branded anti-Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan remains a member of the Council of Europe, energy supplier to Europe. So far, it has faced few repercussions for the crackdown. This poses existential problems for the international organizations and for European human rights architecture. In a really brilliant essay, which will be published in the Journal of Democracy in July, Gerald Naus asks how Azerbaijan can get away with it. How can it have both things? And the conclusion he arrives at is really troubling for anyone who cares about the future of Europe. This is not about Azerbaijan's energy resources or public relations savvy, but rather it's about a lack of commitment to human rights norms among Europeans themselves. To quote him, "The real secret behind Azerbaijan's influence is the remarkable indifference of European democrats to their own human rights institutions." I would add the recent spectacle at a conference in Latvia where Arzu Geybullayeva was making a presentation about violations of press freedom in Azerbaijan and had to contend with a lot of personal attacks from Azeri Gongos who were there. Not only are activists repressed at home, but Gongos are inserted into European forums to make sure that the real story is told. The success of human rights movements depends on shared values, on the public perception that jailing a journalist is not just wrong or illegal, but shameful. Authoritarians like Azerbaijan work to undermine these values. For over 20 years, we've been operating under the assumption that participation in international organizations like the OSCE, the Council of Europe, and others encourages authoritarians to reform themselves. But what if the influence flows in the opposite direction? What if the participation of authoritarians in European institutions erodes the core values of those institutions? What if this causes them to become cynical and artificial? To explore these issues, we have a distinguished panel with us today. Emin Milli is Managing Director of Maidan TV, one of the few alternative independent media platforms in Azerbaijan. Milli was politically persecuted in Azerbaijan and was a political prisoner in 2009. He came to the US this week to receive the Penn Club's Media Freedom Award on behalf of Hadija Ismailova, an investigative journalist who is in prison in Azerbaijan. Canan Aliyev is the director of RFERL's Azerbaijan service. Prior to joining RFERL, Aliyev worked in Washington, D.C. as a broadcaster for Voice of America and was also a regular contributor for BBC World Service. The presentations will be followed by comments from Thomas de Waal, who's the Senior Associate at the Russia and Eurasia Program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. He specializes in the South Caucasus region and is an acknowledged expert on the unresolved conflicts of the region. He has numerous excellent books on Georgia, on Nagorno-Karabakh, and his most latest book is The Great Catastrophe, Turks in the Shadow of Genocide, which was published by Oxford University Press just now. We'll now turn the floor over to Amin, who will speak for about 15 minutes, followed by Canan for about 15 minutes. Then Tom will offer comments on the two presentations for about 10 minutes. Those of you on Twitter, you can follow this presentation and contribute to the conversation by using the hashtag NED events or by following Forum at Think Democracy and Endowment at NED Democracy. If you have not already done so, please take a moment to silence your phones. Finally, let me take this opportunity to thank the many staff members involved in this event, especially our colleagues on the Forum staff. I will now turn the floor to Emin.
Thank you very much for invitation. It's an honor to speak at NED. I'm just coming from New York, and I think it was great to see a huge audience in the Museum of Natural Museum of Natural History. Amazing building, filled in with amazing people. 800 American writers, actors, people who actually are masters of words and narratives. Accepting the award, Freedom to Write, on Khadija's behalf, it was very touching moment for me personally, because Khadija is my personal friend. And there were very big names of American literature and of American also Hollywood scene sitting in that room. And I asked all of them to stand up and to chant Khadija's name. So all of them stood up and were chanting Khadija's name. And that was a symbolic gesture to show that Khadija is actually not alone. She is representing hundreds of people who are in jail in Azerbaijan on politically motivated charges, or because we have no proper legal system. The judges are jailing many more people, not always on political reasons, but also because someone pays bribes. So the people who suffer from this neo-totalitarian regime we have in Azerbaijan is not just 100 political prisoners. I would say these are millions of Azerbaijanis, including those who work for this government, and they are not speaking up because they are afraid for consequences for their families, because this government goes after members of your family, even if you live abroad, after members of your family. And I have heard so many stories that when people posted, links from Maidan TV and living abroad, like in 10 minutes they had a call from Baku from a relative or former colleague or a friend asking to take this down because, this could have consequences on them and they are afraid of this. What it tells to us that what independent media can do, it can be very powerful, and it is very powerful. It tells to us that what Khadija stands for, which is freedom of speech, which is freedom of assembly, which is freedom of expression, is very powerful. That a country, a government, makes billions out of oil and has army and police to punish any citizen that dares to challenge this government on any front, is afraid of Khadija, is afraid of even small, tiny project made on TV. As you know, Ramiz Mehdiyev, who is second most powerful, if not the first, political figure in Azerbaijan. He's head of presidential administration. In December, he wrote anti-US and anti-EU manifesto where he blamed Khadija basically to be a spy, enemy of the state, where he accused Meydan TV of attempting to overthrow the constitutional order, and I'm just quoting him. So when I was reading this, I didn't know to cry or to laugh. You know, if 5, 6, 10 journalists can overthrow your government just by reporting what's happening in the country, you know, then I have big doubts about everything that you are trying to project, you know, via your own media in the country and by the lobbyists that you are hiring here in DC and in every other Western capital to present your narrative and your part of the story. You know, yesterday at this PEN event, I asked 800 American writers and actors to do two things. I asked them, first of all, to use this power that they have over words and try themselves or to ask their friends to put Khadija's life story in a book or in a script for movie. And because this is very important, Khadija has become one of symbols. I mean, there are obviously other very important political prisoners in Azerbaijan, Leyla Yunus, Arif Yunus, Intigam Aliyev, Rasul Jafarov. These are all our dear friends. But Khadija's story is a very, very touching story because she has been targeted as a woman in a Muslim, socially very conservative society in a very dirty way. They filmed her private life. They filmed what she does in bed. Imagine someone would film what you're doing in your bed and would start to blackmail you and ask you to stop your job. I bet many people would stop, even in this country, in any country, anywhere in the world. And there have been many cases when this blackmail of this government, our government, worked. There was one of managing editors of Azadlık newspaper. He faced similar blackmailing, and he stopped. He just disappeared from public sphere. So the government thought it will work with Khadija, but it did not work. Another touching part of this story is that, you know, Khadija was openly atheist. And she did not write really nice things about Islam. But despite of this, and the government, this is what government does, they always try to manipulate. They try to manipulate security agenda, they try to manipulate Islamic threat issue in Azerbaijan, and they try to manipulate the fact that the majority of people in Azerbaijan are socially conservative. So by putting online Khadija's private life, they hoped for honor killing. They hoped that some radical fundamentalist elements in our society would take her life or would attack her. But what happened, and that was again very touching for me, that the most conservative Islamist, I would say fundamentalist part of our society, living in a small village. By the way, that is still the village that the government cannot control, Nardaran. So the council of elderly people of that village made a special statement on Khadija and expressed their support of her work, and also said that they know that governments want to manipulate with their feelings, but now it's not about religion, it's not about anything else. They are standing with Khadija because Khadija was one of the most courageous people in this country to stand up and to tell the truth. And it is, you know, from point of the view of believers, you know, someone who tells the truth and stands with the truth, you know, he value such people a great deal. So the entire continuation of this story, that Khadija actually didn't stop uncovering what she was uncovering. And at the end, she had a choice to stay abroad, but she had very clear warnings if she comes back after Strasbourg, after the advocacy work she was doing in Strasbourg, that she would be jailed. She still came back because she's coming from this classic culture of Eastern European dissidents, and she thinks that you need to continue the work for freedom in the country where you are born till the very till you die. Khadija wasn't just a journalist; she also was supporting families of political prisoners. She became an activist, and you know that it's not a good thing. She's a highly professional, one of the most professional journalists you can find on this planet, and she had recognition of her colleagues worldwide, here in US as well. Christiana Mampour were giving her personally the Courage Award, so she had a very wide recognition of her colleagues worldwide. And despite of this, she was not afraid to be seen as activist as well, because she said, I cannot be just a journalist in a country where they jail everyone, where there are no activists to do, and doing this activist job. She was just saying there is no one else to do this, so I have to do this. And a very touching moment was, again, and I was trying, in New York, telling this to all these American writers and script writers, that she was helping everyone. She was helping those who are in jail because they are considered as Islamic threat. She was helping those who are human rights activists and secularists. For her, like, the values of humanity were above your religion, above your views on God or on politics, you are left or right. She was transcending this when it was coming to what she was doing in helping people. And she also campaigned a lot for rights of Azerbaijanis living in Iran. She was fundraising money and sending this to Iran as well. And that's why she has many, many supporters and people who are in Iran or dealing with Iran, helping Azerbaijanis in Iran to defend their rights there. She also has a lot of love from them. So she is a very, very interesting story, a story of courage, a story of dignity, a story of decency, that is, or at least in my opinion, should be part of identity of everyone who lives in free, or let's put this way, relatively free part of the world, in US, in Europe, because she's representing actually those core values that we unfortunately see today very often betrayed here in US by key politicians, government officials, in Europe, by European Commission, by some governments, specifically British government. And in my opinion, when we come to the question what to do in this situation and how can Western countries, how can they help, what they can do, or those, let's say, in Western not share, I would say, the mainstream realpolitik approach to Azerbaijan. I think a lot can be done, and it's not always the government on the main figures in these governments can help. The was, and some of you know this, Murat Ghassanli, he's now one of the most successful British politicians, of Azeri region in Britain. So we were both very frustrated with the ways how the Western in Azerbaijan and in our part of the world. But we chose two different paths. He decided if Western leaders, they talk to Aliyev, they talk to Putin, so I will do the same. And that's now what he's doing. And I decided that, I do what I do and I believe in what I do regardless of whatever any Western politician, even president or some, State Department official, FCO official, thinks or doesn't values, betrays or doesn't betray those values. I believe in those values genuinely. I'm ready to die for them. I've been in jail for them at least twice. And I'm not going to give up. And I know there are many people in US government, in Europe, in the European capitals and governments who share those values and who are equally frustrated with this approach. And for me, it's important to find those people, to create alliances with them, and to work very hard to do this very hard job to bring everything back on the right track. And I believe that a lot can be done. A lot can be done. I know often we ask this question, but what is the impact of these dissidents or of these civil society groups? I have one answer that I repeat now at every conference I'm speaking at. Would you ask Václav Havel in 1981, Havel, what is your impact? You are sitting in jail, you wrote this piece of paper, Power of the Powerless, a couple of other things. What's your impact? Why nobody cares about you? You just had 700 people signing Charter 77. That's all. Czech people, Slovak people, they don't care about you. You don't matter. So that could be, for a project-minded person, for a realpolitik person, very right question, to Havel in 1981. But I think the deep miscalculation and very uneducated approach and lack of any knowledge and understanding how transformation in any society can work. You need to have people, even if this is 1, 3, 10, 100 people, who never give up on their values, who believe in rule of law, democracy, in fight against corruption, and they do it at the hardest times, at times of very high oil prices in a country that is plagued by resource curse, at a time when your government makes deals with Israel, and as at one of meetings Kenan said, Israel, Azerbaijan, one of things that where government doesn't lie so much is actually that really, like we had for, like I would say maybe centuries, very good relations with Jewish people, and Azerbaijan was one of the rare places where they, let's say, put it this way, much more tolerance and much more friendship with Jewish communities in Azerbaijan than in anywhere in the world, including various parts of Europe. These are power games, and I don't think we can change them now. And my of let's say, as someone who tries to build independent media for Azerbaijan is not to overthrow the government. My goal is not to claim that anyone can do it at this moment, and I don't honestly understand the hysteria of Azerbaijani state propaganda right now that the US is trying to do a regime change in Azerbaijan. I always cannot stop laughing when they start, doing very serious 24/7 just on this topic, because the facts are showing quite and I think it also confusing many people here in DC. But what I think we are doing, and why it's important to support activists, journalists in Azerbaijan, is because if government succeeds in good extermination of this community, what will happen is Azerbaijan will become another Egypt, another Syria, another Libya, and that is what needs to be prevented. And I think if we have, as long as we have in Azerbaijan, and I think we have hundreds, thousands of people in Azerbaijan who share the values that Khadija believes in and she shares, and as long as we have these people, and as long as we can support them so they can become more and they can spread their values and what they believe in, then we will have the soft power that when structural conditions change, these small, very small groups of people can transform the countries and create sustainable, democratic, but also well-run, good-governed nations. And I think that this is very important that strategists, especially our allies here in US government, because whatever Azerbaijani propaganda says, this is of course very ridiculous. Any country is very complex, and the US is one of the most sophisticated countries on the world, and the US government is very sophisticated. You have very many groups and individuals there trying to do very different things often. So my call is not to those who believe that Azerbaijani government can target Obama and Kerry and US and treat it as a third-rate country, at the same time praising Putin and saying that, you know, Russia and this Russian regime is a great ally. And I never understood, and today I don't understand how low could US politics in our region come that they would actually allow themselves to be treated the way Aliyev government treats US now. I think anyone who understands a bit of or Azerbaijani state propaganda does, it's 24/7 spreading the same narratives that Putin is spreading in Russia and worldwide. And I think that it is time that the people of goodwill come together and try to form coalitions that would, at this stage, support those in Azerbaijan, countries like Azerbaijan, to survive in order to be able one day to lead the democratic transformation of these nations in very sustainable way and in democratic way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amin. We'll turn now to Kenan.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be back here at NET and offer my thoughts about what's going on in Azerbaijan. I was here in January when our bureau was just shut down in Azerbaijan, in Baku, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberties Bureau, and Khadija was put in jail. So a few months passed since that time. She was in jail, as you all know, and bureau is still closed, and our people have difficult time to work in Azerbaijan. But despite all of this, Radio Free Europe Azerbaijani service managed to restructure itself, and the broadcast continues. We have new initiatives. We're trying to work, but again, our main concern is Khadija and people on the ground, our freelancers who are now facing all kinds of pressure from the government prosecutors. Just yesterday, prosecutors in Baku, they basically asked the landlord to empty their office and specifically ordered the landlord not to extend lease agreement, rental agreement with RFRL. And the prosecutor who is in charge of the investigation of Khadija's case and our bureau told our lawyer, I believe, that you will not find any place in Baku to rent. Okay. So this is the way the government is handling media in Azerbaijan. And I was also in New York attending this PEN Award. Also had a good to meet U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Samantha Power. She invited me to be on the panel on the freedom of press along with the Ethiopian journalists who are facing the similar problems in their own country. It was a good opportunity, and I'm grateful that Ambassador Power took this initiative and specifically emphasized, the growing crackdown in Azerbaijan, which is still underway. Khadija, I mean, Emin talked a lot about Khadija. You can talk all day about Khadija. We really dearly miss Khadija, but she's still with us, and she's, I think, continue her journalism in writing letters. We're publishing a blog. She published in Washington Post recently. Her letter was published in Washington Post. I think there will be more to come. As from our lawyers, I know she's in good spirit. She's in fighting spirit. She shares cell with 4 or 5 other inmates, female inmates, and she has kind of leadership role among them. As far as I know, she's trying to help them even from inside. And as far as I know, even guards trying to treat Khadija very carefully because probably they're afraid that she will use this opportunity being in the penal colony to write another investigative report how this system works actually from inside. And she told us that she's happy to be in some ways here because it gives a perfect chance the access to the prison, which she will never have otherwise. So expect good report. I mean, I'm sure there will be good report coming, and we'll be happy to publish it. Journalist anyway, in prison anyway, and that's what's happening right now. So what's happening in Azerbaijan, I probably will give my thoughts on the situation. I mean, after by Ramiz Mekhdiev, who now actually practically disappeared from the public life, he is the presidential chief of staff. But his speech put the fundament for the intensifying crackdown in Azerbaijan. Almost all the civil society is practically destroyed. Media organizations basically cannot operate in Azerbaijan. It's getting extremely difficult to get content out of Azerbaijan, not only for us, but also for many others. Practically, we have a situation when you cannot be independent media in Azerbaijan. You cannot function independent media in Azerbaijan. Government is doing everything to undermine operation of any institution which is trying to disseminate information which is not controlled by the government. There is ongoing anti-American campaign, which is interesting. We're witnessing in the last 3 weeks, specifically directed at Secretary John Kerry. Government says he has some office in the Senate, and he's running anti-Azerbaijani campaign, Secretary Kerry. I mean, I think
personally,
and I think that
sitting every day,
and I think that
has nothing more to do.
They probably forgot that he's not in the Senate anymore. He moved to the Foggy Bottom, but it's okay. But for propaganda reasons, this kind of things work. When you have one channel, like several channels, one channel shows program about the president, second channel shows program about his family members, third channel probably about the members of the other family members, other channels about, I mean, this is the reality of Azerbaijan right now. But this campaign is interesting. Why Baku is now going so aggressively after the United States. And I think one of the reasons here, I believe, is like growing Russian influence in Azerbaijan. Putin is increasingly present in Azerbaijan, in Azerbaijani government politics, in decision-making, the way Azerbaijani government international events. For example, I was in Strasbourg covering the Council of Europe event, Parliamentary Assembly in January, and Azerbaijani delegation decided to vote along with Russia against Ukraine. There was a vote on limiting Russian delegation participation in PASE, and the Armenian delegation abstained from the voting. Armenia has very good relations with Russia, we know that. But Azerbaijani delegation voted together with Russia, in the line with Russia, which, and I witnessed that Ukrainian delegation was so upset about that. And it's actually, it tells you a lot how the Azeri policy is now kind of shifting toward Moscow. Baku is buying more and more weapons and ammunition from Russia. It spends annually several $billions of buying Russian weapons. It helps Russian economy. Azerbaijan, and Aliyev personally said that he's investing in Russian ruble. I mean, nobody's investing in Russian ruble right now.
Aliyev does.
But he probably knows more than we do in terms of economics. So he's investing in Russian ruble. But we see this as a, experts, observers see this as a attempt to bribe Russian politicians, just to make them happy. And one of the factors, I believe, that the only destabilizing factor in Azerbaijan left, it's not opposition, it's not political disconnect, it's a war, possibility of the war with Armenia. And I think this attempt of kind of placate Russia after what happened, it's just to keep Russia happy that it doesn't interfere in the conflict right now, and resumption of the conflict or any kind of the war will destabilize Azerbaijan and probably Armenia. And there is increasing voices calling for the war, and I think this is also a very interesting trend. People who were calling for peace now in jail, Arif Yunus, Leyla Yunus. There is no, people-to-people diplomacy anymore. Rauf Mirkadırov, our fellow colleague journalist, he's in jail, and they are accused of national security charges. So if you could end up in Azeri jail on the national security, with national security charges. This is also very interesting because, after Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty was one of the institutions in Azerbaijan which were facilitating some kind of dialogue, people-to-people dialogue with Armenia. We weren't advocating the war. This is not in our charter. But there is no more media left in Azerbaijan will take pro-peace side. I mean, this is also and for 20 years, despite all the promises, the conflict is still there, and it's basically a frozen conflict. And again, in my opinion, it remains as one of the major factors for possible destabilization of the country. And always coming closer to the summer, there is some more we see intensifying violation of the ceasefire, and I think the recent government attempts to take under control of the media was also coming from this fact that government doesn't want any bad information about casualties or conflict to come to the light, because it can affect the public opinion in Azerbaijan. So, all the US organizations, Western institutions basically kicked out of Azerbaijan, only a few remaining. We know about NDI, IREX, Peace Corps, which is organization which is basically connecting these nations. They basically were asked to leave, and they left. The sad story is like, as an observer, I would say that I don't see that US is fighting for them to stay, and that's a problem. And when you don't fight for your own organizations to stay, then of course it makes it easier for the Azerbaijani government to kick them out, and to kick them out for good. In our case, I think we are fighting. RFRL has been around for 65 years. It's a long time, and Azerbaijani service have been around for 60 years. And as long as Azerbaijan needs free flow of information, uncensored news, and place for debate, for discussion, we will be around. I also just briefly, because we would like to leave time for the questions, I use this opportunity to be here and called for immediate release of Khadija Ismail. Khadija must be released. She is there in jail for her journalism. Charges against her absurd. As you know, last week, the man whom government is using as a witness publicly stated on the video that he made these accusations against Khadija Ismail under torture. So it's, despite the fact that he made this statement, prosecution refuses to take this into account and keeps Khadija in jail.
Interesting that it was, he named people, and one of the people was head of department on fight against terrorism in the Ministry of Interior, who was trying to who was torturing this poor guy. So he says that Khadija has driven me to suicide. Like, this is the strategic ally of US.
Okay, and just one few, yes. And while we're in New York, I mean, with this one idea, we will push for this. We will push for Khadija's nomination for the Nobel Prize. It may sound crazy, but we believe she has perfect shot, and we will be working in that direction. This is just, and I mean, rightly announced that at the PEN Award. About European games, you know, this game's coming. Government is trying to portray that, you know, whole world now is kind of uniting against this European game. I love sports, for example. I play football, I watch football. Not happy about Azeri performance on the football team, but I try to compensate myself playing, right? But nobody's against these European games. Everybody likes to, you know, people in Azerbaijan. I mean, I think they should do more sports. In some ways, government is trying to promote the sport. What people are unhappy is that you cannot have, you know, these games while you're keeping people in jail and acting like everything is okay. You know, how many people in jail right now in Azerbaijan just because they think differently, and this is why the growing calls for, you know, for more attention to their problems. I don't think anybody is talking about that, you know, sport and politics should be mixed. But if this event is being done for political reasons, of course, then the reaction will be the same. And I think I will leave this time for the questions. If there will be questions, we'll be happy to answer. And again, thank you for giving us this opportunity to talk. Government media was portraying this event that there's some kind of American project, and Emin and me part of it. I wish that was a project, but there is no project. But
Unfortunately.
So we are just giving our opinion about what's happening in Azerbaijan because we care about Azerbaijan, and we will continue Azerbaijan. There is no conspiracy here. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would say there is currently a pro-Aliyev project in US rather than anti-Azerbaijan project.
All right. Well, thank you. And turning to Tom now.
Thank you. Thank you to the National Endowment for Democracy for the invitation. And I'd like to praise not just the intellectual content, but the courage of our two speakers from Azerbaijan. And just because they're not sitting in Baku doesn't mean that they're not also facing enormous pressure. Their families facing pressure, and we should salute their courage, and also the way that they're filling an information gap on this country. Funnily enough, Emin, the first time I met him was actually just now, today. Canan, I actually met, first time I ever went to Baku was in 1995. We were both young reporters. I think I was a reporter with the Moscow Times. He was with Azad Leak, and we met. And I wrote a wonderful story for the Moscow Times about going to the censor's office with Canan. He took the copy of Azad Leak, and they went to the censor's office, and the censor actually had a razor blade and took out bits that he didn't like, and we were having a friendly chat with the censor. I met actually a real censor. Wrote that story up, and I always remember meeting him there.
And if you remember, you asked censor, I mean, what are you doing here? Because your government says there is no censorship. And the main censor said, no, we don't exist, you know.
Yeah.
And then a week before that, I interviewed this main censor, and he somehow agreed to give us an interview. Next day I brought the newspaper to the censorship office for approval. You know what he did? He cut his own interview.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it was wonderful material, as you can imagine, being a journalist. And I always remember I always remember that. I also should, not to get too nostalgic, it was a very difficult time for Azerbaijan. That was the first time I met Vafa Gulazadeh, who just died last week. I wrote a blog post about him this morning. He was also a very independent-minded Azerbaijani patriot of a type which unfortunately we don't see so much today, and we should remember him today. As Miriam's, as Kenan just mentioned, this event has been already, I think, kind of portrayed in advance as a kind of anti-Azerbaijani event, quote unquote, by a couple of Azerbaijani news agencies. That's rather unfortunate. So I do hope if anyone from a pro-government perspective or with a different perspective here will hear what they have to say. I think that's quite important. I suppose my questions and in my role of kind of discussant is I want to kind of ask our speakers for a bit more analysis about and ask them really to look inside the minds of the Azerbaijani officials and try to understand why this regime, which was never democratic, but had a certain a lighter touch before in its authoritarian state, become much more repressive. Is it something? Is Russia the key answer here? Is there a sort of copying of Russia? Although, of course, Azerbaijan is more authoritarian than Russia, there are not so many political prisoners in Russia. Is it a sort of thing that this is a sort of Putin has constructed a model and we should follow it of a sort of regime of total control, and that we trust Russia to be our kind of insurance against regime change? Is that what's going on? Or is it a fear of Russia? Is there a sense that this Russia is becoming more powerful, and therefore we need to anticipate that by doing things that will please the Russians? Or perhaps the elite is divided and some members think that way and some members think differently. Or is it more improvisational? Is this just a sort of reaction to certain events and certain individuals are becoming more powerful? It's very difficult for us, those of us on the outside who are watching these very worrying and upsetting trends in Azerbaijan to understand. Another frame perhaps to look at it is, to use the phrase, kind of, is this regime in what might be called clinically, a clinical condition called late phase paranoia, which we see with certain other regimes. We're seeing a bit, although Turkey remains a democracy, we see those tendencies in President Erdogan in Turkey, that he blames Turkey's enemies for everything that's going wrong. I think personally I see a 10-year rule among certain leaders around the world that they begin to lose touch with reality after 10 years, whether they be Vladimir Putin or Recep Tayyip Erdogan, or even Misha Saakashvili, even or even in my own country, we saw the same with Margaret Thatcher after 10 years. Obviously, very different cases, but a certain that you stay in power for a certain period and you lose a bit of touch with what's really going on in the country. Is this what's happening to President Aliyev in his? So I have a lot of questions here. Because I think if we begin to understand that, then obviously we begin to craft a policy towards what's going on. Clearly, keeping the message alive, mentioning the names of Hamid, Hadija, and so on is the first thing to do. But then, secondly, there has to be an approach with the government of Azerbaijan to try and understand what's driving them and what could persuade them to change course. And I'm also glad that Canan mentioned the Armenia and Karabakh factor, because this is also a trend which is worrying, that three people who Canan has already mentioned, Leyla and Arif Yunus and Rauf Mirkadyrov, have been specifically charged with collaboration with Armenians. In every case, it's a ridiculous charge. Leila is basically best known as a human rights activist. She has had many projects, of which this was a small. Arif is been to Yerevan a few times and collaborates with Armenians on a very intellectual level. Rauf Mekadirov was basically based in Ankara and just made a quick trip to Yerevan to meet some civil society people, and suddenly, when he's actually still based in Turkey, is arrested on these charges. So clearly, this message seems to be that we, the government, have a monopoly on talking to the Armenians. We're the only people allowed to do that. That's clearly very worrying. And we've also seen last few years the case of Akram Aylisli, a writer who wrote a novel. Many of you know this case called Stone Dreams, which had portrayed Armenians in a positive light, and he was personally attacked. Members of his family were forced to lose their jobs. And so there was a very specific campaign against Akram Aylisli for talking in a positive tone about Armenians. So is this...
His books were burned.
Yeah, so this is also a worrying trend. And of course, the next question is, what is the danger that this trend could get out of control, and that the government, if life gets more difficult for them in various fashions, perhaps economically, could be tempted to play the Karabakh card, the patriotic card, and perhaps start some kind of military operation, maybe even a small one, against the Armenian side, something which could be quite dangerous. So these are questions. We have more questions than answers, but certainly I don't see much coherence about this. I do see paranoia. I do see improvisation, fear of Russia, as well as closeness to Russia. I see frustration with the non-resolution of the Karabakh conflict. None of this justifies the behavior, but perhaps it gives us a kind of portrait of what's going on. And I'll be interested in these two gentlemen who study Azerbaijan and are much more deeply inside these problems and needed to hear what they have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Why don't we have Emin and Canan respond to this point, particularly what do you think, what has Russia's role been? Do you think it's responsible for the sort of dramatic downturn over the last year? And how would you try to recreate the thinking in Baku along those lines? Maybe start with that question. Do you want to?
I think Moscow is and Putin and his policies domestically, especially, kind of turned into a really bad example, which Azeri government easily adopting. For example, if Russian Duma passes the law restricting the activity of NGOs or foreign media, they translate it from Russian into Azeri, and they adopt it in Azeri parliament. The many laws which Russia passed recently, especially how to handle the double citizenship, foreign citizenship, people abroad, restriction on the media, restriction on the foreign organization, foreign funding for NGOs, copy-paste from the Russian laws. So Russia, in this regard, is playing kind of a role of the bad example. I mean, it's a bad role model for Azerbaijan and for other countries in the region. In Central Asian countries, we see the similar laws passing. It's easier to translate from Russian than English, so they don't have to even invent a law. You don't have to write a law, you can just translate it and put it. So in that regard, it's a bad example. Also, I mean, Putin is definitely, his positions got stronger after what happened in Ukraine. after Russia invaded Ukraine, annexed Crimea, and of course it sent a chilling effect to all these little dictators around Russia, and they realized who is the boss in the region. I mean, U.S. is so far away, European Union so far away. The response to what happened in Europe, in Ukraine, you know, most people on the ground don't see as sufficient. Yes, there are sanctions, but Russia still Crimea, and pro-Russian separatists control Donbas area. So, and you have a conflict in Azerbaijan, which could be immediately, overnight, become from frozen conflict to go to the stage of active conflict. And taking into account how much Russia has influence over, Armenia, which occupies Azerbaijani territories. So, this is the fact. Then, of course, I'm sure people in the government, they don't trust Putin, but they would like to keep him close. Keep your friends close, your enemies closer. So this is the principle. Like, just make sure that he is on your side. And also, I think the U.S., just from my analysis, just left this space for the Russia in many ways. There is no improvements in negotiations. There is no resolution in the conflict. At the same time, if U.S. cannot support one, institution in Azerbaijan, it tells a lot about U.S. influence in Azerbaijan. If U.S. cannot achieve to get one journalist or one or two political prisoners out of Azerbaijan, it also tells a lot about U.S. Position in Azerbaijan. Government doesn't arrest pro-Russian politicians. I don't know. Somehow they arrest on the pro-democracy activists. But definitely, Russia is a factor, and I think it's going to continue to be and always will be a factor in Azerbaijan and in Azerbaijani politics. But unfortunately, yes, Putin is playing a very negative role. Tomorrow there will be a victory day. Who is going to be staying next to President Putin? On May 9th? Yes, President Aliyev. While even others like Lukashenko and other, like Karimov, for example, of Uzbekistan, they decided not to go to Moscow.
Okay, thanks. Maybe we can have Amin also respond to that. I also want to throw out, there was this strange statement from Putin saying that Azerbaijan was supporting Chechen terrorists and so forth, that there was very kind of aggressive statement a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if that puts another wrinkle into this relationship, and what does that mean for Aliyev?
I think I have to say, politely disagree with Tom and with Kenan on the possibility of relaunching this conflict in Karabakh. And then I also disagree with Kenan on the fact he said that people are happy about sport. That Meydan TV has done a lot of reports and still doing on just going, asking people's opinion, doing Vox Populi, and doing basically reportage about how people live, in these fancy sport facilities that cost hundreds of millions. And there is just one story we published 2 days ago. There is a family, and it's living in extreme poverty, and they had the problems with, like, the son couldn't really see well, so we published it, and then we had a lot of feedback from citizens, like people. This is very good thing, about talking about impact, that every time when we publish some material about people living in very bad conditions in Azerbaijan, other citizens are writing to us, are asking for telephone numbers, going and helping those people. So this doctor in that case will help this child for free because the family has no money to pay for any sort of health care. So I think that majority of Azerbaijan people, that is our, let's say, conclusion after working on this for more than a month, are very not happy that this government spends in the middle of financial crisis, because Azerbaijan has its own financial crisis. Devaluation of national currency recently by 34% hit very hardly on every Azerbaijani. They are not happy with these white elephant projects. They think that this money could be spent much more wisely. But this is, a story, these sort of dictators, because they just love to invest money in this white elephant project. So I disagree that everyone, and I'm not happy. Like, I think 9 billion could be, housing, on healthcare, on various social policies, or on supporting small and medium enterprises, giving them loans that they could develop businesses and create more jobs. But for some reason, government thinks that this is not really necessary in Azerbaijan. About war, I think that one thing Heydar Aliyev was telling to Ilham Aliyev, that, try, you can threaten as much as you want, you can do whatever you want, but in words, never ever start a war. And I think that one of the reasons why Aliyev has also, when we talk about security, so much support, also here in DC, because, behind the closed doors, they brag about it, that look, if we are out, anyone who comes after us will start the war. Do you need a crisis, another war in this region? So I don't buy this argument. I think they are very, very smart, and they hire the best PR agencies. Here in the US, Azerbaijan government spends monthly, this is official number, 350,000 best lobbyists. So they know very well what you need to talk behind the closed doors with the people you need to talk in the US, especially on security issues. So every government, every president that changed in Azerbaijan before Heydar Aliyev came to power, we had 5 or 6, it was because of Karabakh conflict. So there were some defeats, there were refugees, and the presidents were going, the next was coming. And Aliyev knows it very well. And I think the way how I view Karabakh conflict, there was a caricature, our caricaturists painted. It was in the middle of invading Ukraine. I think it was August last year. Putin invited, there was some sort of suddenly intensification of the conflict on the border. So 20, 30 people from each side died. It was quite a high number for a couple of days. And Putin invited Aliyev and Sarkisyan to Sochi, and in the middle of invading Ukraine, presented himself as a peacemaker. And for me, this shows very well who really stands behind this conflict. And the caricature was Putin, imagine Putin's head, halo above his head, a bit below, on the left side, Armenian elite, drinking, having fun, wealthy. On the right side, below Putin, next to Armenian elite, Azeri elite, big stomachs, mustachios, wealthy, happy, having fun. And Armenian elite, the dead bodies of Armenian soldiers, and below the Azeri elite, dead bodies of Azerbaijani soldiers. So this was the first time that we as Meydan TV posted, and for that reason, I have never seen such a phenomenon in Azerbaijani and Armenian media, that we posted, Azerbaijani media posted, let's say, this caricature content and it had thousands of shares and likes. 50-50. 50% of those shares likes were from Armenia, 50 from Azerbaijan. And for the first time, and there were hundreds of comments, and for the first time, I have not seen even one Azeri comment with a hate speech against Armenians, and not even one Armenian comment with hate speech against Azeris. Rather, the comments were that we are tired of Russia manipulating us and our governments manipulating us, using us, keeping us like, thinking that we're just ships, and us, bringing sacrifice. Because at the end of the day, those who profited from this conflict were Moscow, and you see that Moscow, what they did in Azerbaijan. I always say to my Ukrainian friends, we have our Crimea and Donbass, we have it already, and it all started end of 80s, beginning of 90s. And if you look at the border, it's just the same Donbass and Crimeas are created almost around every country that Russia is neighboring. And on the one hand, on the other hand, when it comes to Armenian and Azerbaijan government, every time you see some election coming or something important, something that could transform Azerbaijan or Armenia, it is amazing. You see the intensification of anti-Azerbaijan propaganda in Armenia, or intensification of anti-Armenian propaganda in Azerbaijani propaganda media. And you see that there are conflict on the border, 5 Azeri soldiers killed, 3 Armenian soldiers killed. So they hijack completely, they keep this manipulation, and they do it so masterfully on both sides that it's really hard to deal with that. But I think that one case that we had with this caricature showed me that actually there are a lot of people in Azerbaijan and Armenia who understand actually what's going on. There was very interesting reporting we did at Maidan, just asking one question. Okay, if Ilham Aliyev is a patriot of Azerbaijan, if all these ministers, all these members of parliament, all these, stars of Azerbaijani show business or whatever, who speak about, this nationalism, importance of liberation of lands, why their sons, brothers in the army? Why not even one dead body, I don't know, of a son of a minister or MP, or even a one case where we could see that their sons are in the army, on the front line? Why we have never heard about this? Is this a war just for poor people, people living in poverty in Azerbaijan and Armenia? So, and this is the thing, this is why I think that by just playing the games of Aliyevs and Sarkisians and Putins will not end up creating stability in this region. This will end up very badly. For me, this is important, that we understand these manipulations that's going on, and that we can actually communicate it to people everywhere. Yeah, I will stop here because I have to stop.
Well, we should take some questions. We're going to have to end promptly at 11:30, and I'm going to ask, just in the interest of getting the most questions, for people to please keep them short. And so, thank you. Here, please, Audrey. Yeah, there's a mic coming. Thanks.
Thank you. Audrey Alstead, Wilson Center. I'd like to go back to Tom's question, which initially was, why do we see the crackdown in 2013-14? Did something change? And what is the government, do you think, looking like on the inside? Is Ilham Aliyev really in charge of everything, or is the most powerful man Ramiz Mehdiyev? And if so, what does all that mean?
First of all, they do it because they can get away with this. And, if you have political opponents and you don't really engage in European, let's say, model, you go after your opponents. And this is what government is doing. And I think, they don't believe in civil society. They don't believe that there could be opposition. There is more money coming to the country, and there's a lot of corruption is going on. And they're want anybody to cover this. They don't want any Khadijas or some, Radio Liberties or Maidan TVs to even talk about that, because this corruption is so obvious. You can see it in front of your eyes. They're building this stadium, for example, but nobody really knows the cost of this stadium. And it's in billions. So when you start digging and trying to find out, of course, then you end up with the investigative reports what Khadija did. But I think it's also because there is an inflated sense of importance within this government. They think that they're so important for the world that this international community, European Union, United States, will always look other way when they will put, people in jail, shut down the radios, basically crack down. I think one of the reasons, as I said, because they feel like they can get away with this, and so far they manage that. There is no serious pushback from anywhere, including from the United States. As long as they will feel that there is no personal even consequence for their actions, like in forms of sanctions or Magnitsky Act type of things, there will be no stop on this crackdown. There is almost nothing to crack anymore. And the one point is about who is running the country. I mean, I think, of course, Ilham is in full charge. Ramiz Mehdiyev disappeared from public life. I think there is now fight who is going to be second in charge. That's the interesting question. Who is in second in charge in Azerbaijan? The prime minister, he is not active. He doesn't even speak Azeri properly. Speaker of Parliament, it's nobody. And so that's the now main question. And there is some news that there is intensified fight between the oligarchs for the space around Ilham. So who is going to be number two? For me now is more important question than who is number one right now. And that will be interesting to watch.
Maybe a couple of words about this. I mean, I don't know why people are surprised about this crackdown. I mean, there was never a month in Azerbaijan that we did not have crackdown since Aliyev Sr. came to power in '93. When Azerbaijan was entering Council of Europe, we had around 700 political prisoners. That was one of the conditions of entering Council of Europe, that Azerbaijan would eventually release all these political prisoners. So there was always crackdown. If you look at the trajectory, it is crackdown, Azerbaijani government, this regime, they had very consistent policy. From year to year, the free space was shrinking. And they were doing it very consistently. So there is Arab Spring, they were using this argument to do. There is a Ukraine using it as argument. So that was secondary. Had very clear strategy, leading Azerbaijan towards a country, a society, a completely closed society. And I think we have not reached the worst apex. Like, it's gonna get worse. It's gonna get worse. And if we ask why it's happening, well, I don't want to spend much time on this, but it happens from, global financial crisis, from Iraq war, like all these big events that were undermining credibility and making the West weaker and weaker in many ways, had huge impact on the one hand. On the other hand, you had the increasing very, very high oil prices. I mean, Ilham Aliyev was really a lucky man. When he came to power in 2003, replaced his father in dodgy elections, since then he had every year more and more money. The first time we now see how he handles crisis was this moment of devaluation of currency. And what he did, the director, the head of Central Bank of Azerbaijan, was on state television saying, Azerbaijani manat will not be devaluated. It's me telling you, it's our government will never let this go. I discussed with president, this never happened. The next day, manat is being devaluated by 34%. So they handled it awfully. I think if they do a couple of such mistakes, I don't think they are really will stay in charge anymore. Like, so I think that we're seeing now Aliyev in crisis, and you can see he's not Lee Kuan Yew, he's not like some successful or South Korean dictator Park, or yeah, he's I think it's quite fragile. The system you have in Azerbaijan seems very strong. It's quite fragile. This is part of their fears. This is why they believe in these conspiracies. This is why they try to. Some people ask me, but they are so strong. Why they jail? They wouldn't jail. Nothing would change anyway. I deeply disagree. I think they are doing completely right thing from their point of view, because if they stop jailing people and going after people just for year, you would see the next day 1 million people on the streets in Azerbaijan. There is no loyalty within this regime. I see Azerbaijan is a very small country, and many Azeris, they know the family members, friends, people work for government in private sector. Everyone is unhappy. But the reason why people don't want to step into this dissenting territory is because we are living, it's a country, the classical case of of resource curse. It's you have like government has had over the last decade or more and more money from year to year, basically giving money to people like they were not very well at it. I think if they wouldn't waste too much money, they would actually could have much more support. But they were somehow, spending this money on these white elephant projects, wasting a lot of money. And I think that what we're gonna see now, and they have been very well in managing foreign influence. Like really, Azerbaijan is one of top 10 countries in US that invest so much in lobbying. They are this, and they get the best advice to when they come speak behind closed doors with US officials or in Europe to say right things. Talk about security, talk about energy. They have these mantras. Azerbaijan is strategically important. Azerbaijan helps to diversify Europe's energy demand, which is actually, there is a lot of propaganda, and I'm happy that European Stability Initiative will soon publish a paper exactly on this mantra and on this. I try to find the mild word, not B word for the really propaganda, and we have to tackle this on intellectual level, because there have been too many. I think partly because what's happening in Azerbaijan is happening because for US and Europe it's really not important what's happening in Azerbaijan. They're busy with Russia, with East Middle East, everything. So the people who are in charge in Azerbaijan often and make decisions sometimes like quite narrow business interests. What was it? DC Senate just adopt a resolution praising Azerbaijan and openly writing that Azerbaijan is a great friend because they gave us 2 contracts, one to Microsoft, one to Boeing company, and it created thousands, it was billions dollars contract, and it created thousands of jobs in DC. So, so sometimes a very particular, BP is a good case in UK, that they, state within the state in UK, they lobby, they influence the government in US, in UK and in European Commission, buying into this propaganda of Azeri government about strategic importance of Azerbaijan. In fact, Azerbaijan is just 4% to European Union in oil and no gas. And after only 2020, and this oil will decline, and after 2020 they will give just 2%. Russia gives 30, and this oil gas, if not Azerbaijan, Angola, or any other similar country can. What is really importance of Azerbaijan? Azerbaijan is important because Azerbaijan has cash, it operates as mafia, and I'm suspicious of any US government official, European politician, expert, journalist, who tries to retell publicly and privately the messages, the narratives, the senses that are funded by Aliyevs and Putins of this world. And I think that the investigation, I'm finishing, of this representative of Jobbik party in Hungary, who was one of the leaders of Jobbik far-right party in Hungary and member of European Parliament. There is now investigation, criminal investigation against him because he turns out to be a Russian spy. And there is a lot of that. There's a lot of cash, there's a lot of corruption in cabinets, in dark rooms, and that's what I see. And I think the investigative journalists also here in the US, in Europe, should start, digging deeper when they see in these talk shows, at these events, not Azeris, Westerners coming up and retelling, the census messages of Aliyev's and Putin's.
Rich, Ambassador Kausler-Rich.
Rich Koslerich, George Mason University. Maybe take a little exception on the effectiveness of the lobbying effort, because quite frankly, if one looked at a cost-benefit analysis of it, I'm not sure it's having the impact on policymakers that you seem to assume, but I've been in the policy game for a while. But the question really is, what would you expect the U.S. government to do now? Really two choices: practice diplomacy as we always have, or take more active steps, such as sanctions. And would anyone in the regime respond if there were sanctions imposed?
When I was chosen for Chevening Scholarship, this is a British government scholarship, to study for 1 year in London, the guy who was sitting in front of me asked, why should we send you to UK to study? You're enemy of the state. This will destroy our relationship with this government. Which was very cynical and quite honest question. And I said, it's not about me, but you should invest in independent-minded people to get education, and best education available around the world, because actually we are your insurance. So you're investing long-term, possibility having society in Azerbaijan to be transformed in a democratic one, more stable one, a better run, society on many levels. And I think when we come to the question, what U.S. government should do in Azerbaijan or in Russia, in these sort of countries, I think it's to continue the diplomatic work. I don't think that these large-scale sanctions work, to be honest, and the evidence shows it doesn't. But so I'm against sanctions against Azerbaijan, but I fully support individual sanctions targeted at judge here, prosecutor there, deputy minister there, the people who openly engaged in gross human rights violation and were so daring, didn't even hide to do it publicly, so there should be a list of such people. And this, you have to understand, Azeri government, you are coming from this liberal democracies, you have a different, this is mafia bosses you're dealing with. So if you think diplomacy alone will work, you are very wrong. These people, they respect naked power. They need to feel that you can hurt them. So I'm not saying hurt them always, everywhere. I'm saying hurt them here and smile there. Hurt them here, show your power, and lend your hand. And when you start doing this, they will start respecting you much more, like they respect Putin. And I have several now insiders information. There is more and more will within Azeri government and in Aliyev's inner circle and in Aliyev himself, the shifting towards Eurasian Union, because they understand this naked power. And what European Union and US does in our region, you lose completely respect, and not just of Aliyev or Putin, but also the population, people. They look at this expression of concern. I'm not saying it's not important. It's very necessary, and it should be done actually more aggressively. But this alone is not enough. So they should be, not one policy. They should be, an entire tool of various things but it's very important to show naked policies. Very important to show them that, because these people, you know, this is Russia, Azerbaijan is very similar in this. They are having this anti-US, anti-Europe campaign, but their daughters, their sons, wives, their lovers, they have houses, businesses here. They come to doctors, to US, to Europe. So I think what they have done well, they just played various kinds. There is even no unity between ambassadors, Western ambassadors in Azerbaijan. How Ramiz Mehdiyev manipulates the Western ambassadors, he doesn't meet some ambassador for some time. So this ambassador is getting in panic. Oh my God, I'm doing it bad. Like, this is ridiculous. This is how, if you go to details, this is what's happening. And, you know, and there is, of course, need for consolidated action and for multiple approach. Not one approach, but multiple approach. And I think that could be much more effective. Start having respect both on this mafia level in these countries, but also on the level of, you know, people, you know, because they will finally understand that you have some power. Because now your power in our region is a myth.
Just one word. Last time, when you asked, like, what would you want U.S. government to do? Last time, Secretary Kerry called Baku. They closed our bureau 5 days later. So I'm afraid to ask for anything right now.
And there are no consequences.
But I think it's
Well, they should do
if
something else.
this is what exactly Putin and Aliyev want. They want U.S. look weak, that they don't stand for their own or organizations or values. They leave you and they go. And this is what the Russian propaganda is doing right now in Ukraine, and exactly what Aliyev propaganda is doing. That, you know, they don't care about you. They care about oil, energy, and security, and that's it. And this is the, you know, the portrayal of the United States, that this is a weak, you know, position, and it's going to get weaker. And is that good for U.S. image? I think it's not. It's not good for U.S. image. The U.S. should stand for its values, for people who share these values, and it's kind of versus values. I think U.S. interest and values, they go together in this matter, because, you know, more free country like Azerbaijan, you know, democratic, it's a stronger country. It will be ally of the United States, real ally, not just who's blackmailing you. You are the support around to Putin's bed. It doesn't work like that. So I hope they limit what U.S. can do. But for example, when AP correspondent asked me, what do you want from U.S. right now? I said, I would like to President Obama pick up his phone, call President Aliyev and tell him, let Khadija go, for example, just for the starter. And let's see if it works or not. Because President Obama stands for these values. He stated this before and now. And why not take this chance and see? I mean, this is the basic things. But if you're not doing that, and if you just, and we are not here to beg for anything, to be honest. You know, we are giving our perspective, our opinion. We know it's something like we have to do ourselves. It's our society, our country. But we have expression in Azerbaijan. You get upset from people from whom we have expectation, and we have expectations. And if you don't meet them, fine. Then we will be just upset. But we will continue to do what we're doing right now.
All right, thank you very much. We are already out of time. We're actually a couple of minutes over. And if I'd like to give everyone kind of a chance for any last comments, but those were, I think, were actually pretty good roundouts themselves. But Tom, would you like to make any further thoughts?
No, I just think we've got to keep on holding these events in a calm but, you know, engaged way. And I think thank you for Ned and keeping the profile of what's going on. And thank you for our, you know, two guests. That's all I would say.
I don't know if you have any last
Yes.
very brief thoughts.
Brief.
Yeah, being brief is my weakness. Yeah. Well, I think I want to finish my part just with saying that a lot can be done I disagree with everyone who says, oh, this crowd cannot do really anything, we cannot operate, we cannot support anything. It's not true. And we had, Meydan TV had the special project Letters from Jail. We had even people working in jail for us. Not for us, for their own values, for their own cause. And Azerbaijan, despite all our criticism that we were expressing here today against its government, or mafia that runs the country, I mean, it is different than North Korea. It is different, still different than Uzbekistan. And you can do things. And you can do things within Azerbaijan and outside of Azerbaijan. And actually, Radio Liberty and Meydan TV are two examples that you can do. You can reach out to hundreds, thousands of people. This is what we are doing. And the government tolerates this, you know, and at least until now. This is very important. So I would like to call upon you to protest against any sort of we give up on Azerbaijan mentality. I think we need to have now more institutional approach. We need to find more support, institutional support, and to help now global institutional infrastructure, media, think tanks, various human rights groups, you know, in Azerbaijan and outside of Azerbaijan. That could, in the future, be basis for important democratic and sustainable transformation and non-violent transformation in Azerbaijan. Because when structural conditions change, there will be a moment when these small groups, which are considered marginal now, or even created, they will be in some way marginal, they will play a key role in transformation. This happens so many times in so many parts of the world. So this is important to support dissidents, activists, journalists in Azerbaijan as much as we can, and increase support. That would be the right approach of, you know, U.S. government. Increasing engagement with Azerbaijani government and even doubling, tripling support for Azerbaijan civil society. Unfortunately, I don't see it now.
Thank you.
I will say,
Aliyev,
I will have to go to my next meeting, so that's why that's my last word.
So
Thank you.
we're sorry to lose Kenan, but thank you everyone, and thanks for your presentations today. And as Tom had mentioned, we're likely to have more of these discussions as the situation progresses. Thank you, everyone.